Very much. That's a great setup for our next segment. We bring in senior fellow and military expert for defense priorities, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, and Clarion Intelligence Network Director Ryan Morrow. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, we'll start with you, Colonel Davis. How successful do you think that these strikes were? Because we do have before and after photos, and they showed the destruction to 3 chemical weapons facilities. Colonel Davis?
There's no question that the facilities were absolutely flattened and destroyed. I mean, utterly annihilated. But the bigger question is towards what end? Because so far, all evidence appears that those buildings were pretty much empty. And so the question is, what was the message that was received? We know what we wanted to send, but Assad responded the very next day with 28 airstrikes and very heavy artillery attacks in the very area where all these things took place. So I'm not sure that the message that we wanted to be received has been received. And then a bigger question is, then what? Have we set ourselves up to where we have to respond militarily anytime there's even a suspected chemical attack? And those are big questions that need to be answered.
And you bring up a good point. When there is potentially another chemical attack, it makes me wonder what the red line is. Listen to what U.S. Ambassador to you, Nikki Haley, had to say.
We have to be very conscious of the fact that we can't allow even the smallest use of chemical weapons. That's why you saw the president strike this past weekend. That's why you saw him expel 60 Russian spies after the attack in Salisbury. This very easily could happen in the United States if we're not smart and if we're not conscious of what's happening.
So Ryan, I'm kind of wondering what the red line is here. Is it chemical weapons when there's video of the attack, conventional weapons? What is it?
Sure, I interpret that to mean that our red line is no one can use chemical weapons, even on a small scale, without there being some type of response. But it's very vague as to what that response is. It might just be sanctions or some small measure. It's not a commitment that globally, every time someone uses chemical weapons, we have to go to war and bomb them. That's just not how I am interpreting it. And each situation is different, so I don't feel that we're getting pushed into a corner where this is going to result in endless military conflict, because the fact of the matter is, it's pretty easy to make chemical weapons if you have a country, and so rogue states are going to be doing that regularly. And we should also talk about biological weapons, which are even worse and also relatively easy to produce.
Yeah. Colonel Davis, we think we know the instinct of the president here, because before this chemical attack took place, he did say he wanted to pull out of Syria, take all 2,000 U.S. troops and pull them out. Things have certainly changed. What do you think the strategy is now?
Right. I hope that he continues with that strategy, because the truth of the matter is those troops on the ground saddle us with enormous strategic risk, because you have the Russian armed forces, you have the Syrian armed forces, the Iranian Quds forces, possible clashes with our own NATO ally in Turkey, and all for that we get very little, in fact we get no strategic benefit from having our troops there, and we have plenty of strategic assets to keep our interests safe in the region. So those troops don't actually help us with our interests, but it does put a lot of stress and risk for us. And I hope the president continues what he said and removes those troops in the very near future.
Yeah, and we are expecting new sanctions to be announced today, additional sanctions, Ryan, against Russia. How do you expect Russia to retaliate here?
With the normal drama. I mean, every time there's a disagreement with the Russians, we hear this dramatic reaction, but it doesn't result in the World War III that they're always predicting. You had General Mattis and the U.S. military kill a whole bunch of Russians not that long ago in Syria as they approached the forces that we were training and U.S. forces on the ground involved in that area. We heard similar rhetoric after the first strike on the Syrian airbase following the chemical attack. And nothing happened. In fact, we called, and then the Russians left the area so they didn't get killed. So I see the same pattern happening over and over again. But I must say, as much as I would love to be out of Syria or out of anywhere in the world, keep in mind that it's not just about ISIS in Syria. You've got Assad, which is Iran and Hezbollah. You've got Al-Qaeda with a massive army there. Countless other rebels that believe in international jihad that will use that territory to strike at us. And the best thing we have going for us in that area is the alliance of Kurds, Arabs, and Christians that we're trying to train. And if you don't want to be involved in that area, you've got to have locals on the ground that will fight for you so you don't have to. No other choice.
It is a tough and complicated way forward. Ryan, Colonel Davis, thank you very much, both of you. We appreciate it. I just want to point out that investors seem to think